Hey tubers, welcome back for another adventure. Some of these videos are going to break off into subtopics, and one of the topics with this thing is the throttle cable was sticky. I mean, it's just, you can see where it's got abrasions and melty marks and so forth. So the throttle cable is shot. And I'm sure I can find one that would fit on the internet, or I could go through the trouble of building one. Now, this is an example of one of those China cables, right? Normally they're pretty cheap, like a couple of bucks each. You can also get them at Walmart. They're your typical brake cable. I mean, they work, right? It's very simple to slide that in and out. It's really very easy to work with. Some of you might say, you know, it's junk and you're going to end up with troubles and all that kind of stuff. No. Worst comes to worst, this cable snaps and, you know, the thing slows down to an idle and I can't go any further. It's not like a brake cable or anything. And by the way, they're brake cables on bicycles, so if they're reliable enough to be a brake cable on a bicycle, I'm thinking they should be reliable enough to be a throttle cable where the default is idle rather than the default as you're charging down a mountain and you try to stop to keep from running into something is snap and oops, I'm not slowing down anymore. I'd rather use it as a throttle cable, so that's where I'm going with it. Now what I've done is I've laid it out here and, you know, around and back, and you could see the new cable is plenty long enough compared to the old cable. Obviously that's kind of important. If you're a few inches short, when you go to turn, you end up with this unfortunate experience that one way the thing idles down like it should, and you go to turn the other way and you actually start giving it throttle because you're pulling on the cable. So you know, or frankly the cable just isn't long enough. Your throttle is over here or something. So that's what you start with. I'm going to take the cable ends off, as in the end of the outside casings off. I'm going to take this one off, and I'm going to take this one off. You can see I have an adjuster here. I also took the carburetor off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay all of this out before I start cutting anything. The nice thing about a nice new fresh cable where the end is clean, actually I even think this is soldered on the end. The nice thing about that is I can slide this right out, do whatever I need to do with this casing, right? And this slides right back in. It's one-handed, it might not, but it'll go right back in, right? I mean, literally that easily. So that gives me plenty of adjustability. Let's go with it this way. I'm going to leave their cable end. I'm going to set it up so that the cable end here is the one that goes on this, and I'm going to set it up with this guy, adjust the length, and I'm going to go backwards to the point where I hook the throttle back up. And once I get everything to length, I'll put a solder ball on it with a torch, and I'll show you that thing. So anyway, the camera will come on and off at various stages, and I'll kind of show you where I'm at. Right now, having the camera on, even if it's on a tripod, quite honestly, when I'm working with those cables, they're going to be whipping everywhere, and it's going to be very hard to show you exactly what I'm up to. But at each critical stage, I'll kind of pop it back on and show you. Okay, thanks. Hey folks, so what I did was I slid the cable out of the, this is the new cable. So I slid this right out of here, right, and I fed the center of the cable through. I cut the casing with the cable not in it, and that's fairly easy to do. I used a grinder to do it and safety glasses. And once you do that, to clean up the end here, you take a drill bit and you put it in your vice grips and you just kind of clean up the end here. So once I did that, you know, I slid the cable through the end piece, and if you slide it up, see how nice that all fits. I might just put a piece of shrink wrap over it. But just remember, as you're working on this end, right, gradually you're going to start putting stuff on here and you won't be able to slide the shrink wrap over it anymore. You also have to make sure, and I just dropped this through, that you have all these ends on, and all you want to make it like you want it before, once again, you put the eye on this thing. There's a few different ways of putting an eye on this, and I'll show you how I do it. Given that I haven't soldered on this exact piece of cable yet, I left plenty of length here. It's really, the eye's going to go maybe an inch off the end. So I've left plenty of cable because I am going to do a couple of practice ones to see which one I like best. I am going to use the die grinder to cut the cable. So you cut the case and you cut the cable with the die grinder. Even though this particular fit is not really great, and I'll show you. See right there, it's not great. I guess I can either cut the end of it off. You know what, I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to cut this end off and let that sink in here a little bit. That way it's a little neater, a little better self-centering. So I'm going to do that now, and then next time you come back, we'll be soldering an end on this thing, and then it's just a matter of putting the car back on, and we're done. Welcome back. So we're coming to the final conclusion on building a cable, and what I just want to show you, just a couple of quick things. Before I cut this cable to length, I wanted to see how well it solders or didn't solder, how well it would wet with the solder, and so forth. So what I do is I take, this is bell wire. It's not marked on the spool, but it's just thin copper wire. And what I like to do before I cut the cable, you see, if you wrap it around there nice and tight, it keeps the cable from honestly splintering. This side wasn't wrapped and that side was. See the way the cable is still pretty tight here, and you see the way it kind of unraveled. So that's one trick. Before you cut the cable, the center part of the cable, literally the cable, make sure you wrap it. Do not use diagonal cutters to cut it because you'll make a mess out of it. Use a grinder or a Dremel tool. The other nice thing about putting the copper wire around it, once you use your flux, you could kind of, well, I wrapped the copper wire around it, then I put the flux on it and heat it a little bit and put a little more flux on it, and then just go for the solder. But with this copper wire, you could kind of form the type of eyelet you want right before you solder it up, right? You could kind of create like a little ball or whatever you're going to want on there to grab In my case, I have to grab that eyelet there. You when you do put the whole thing together, make sure you have enough cable. The last thing you want to do is put an eyelet on it and discover you don't have enough length on the inner cable, so now you got to cut the casing back to get some more inner cable length, so to speak. And if you do that too much, then the overall assembly isn't long enough. Obviously, I'm going to get that off of there, feed that through here, make sure my lengths are all good. Then by popping this end off, right, I can feed out almost 4 inches. I can very comfortably put a, have it sticking right out of here, somewhere around here. I can put a solder ball on it, right? Then pull it back in, hook it here, adjust cable length, and I'm all done. So we're almost to the point where we're gonna have this throttle on here and it's ready to go. So here we have it. The cable's all hooked up, right to the end. It opens and closes as it should, right? I have it at a bad bend here, but it opens and closes just like it should. Even if you do it slowly, right, it closes to where it doesn't stick. It's not going to run away. You guys could see right here, maybe even I could zoom in a little better. You could see I kind of made a ball with this copper wire, wrapping it around the cable. And then I used solder, and I kind of bent the far arm out of the way, put it in, and bent it back. So yeah, now it's just a matter of putting it on here and getting a gas tank on this thing, and then I guess it'll be ready, just about ready for a ride. So we're getting there. I think I'm going to wrap this up here. I think because this is starting to get long if I put all those little pieces together. I think I'm going to wrap it up here and we'll start up again with this thing. The other parts of working on this thing. About working on this cable, obviously it's for this Manco Talon or Lin High Bighorn or whatever you want to call it, but you can build these cables for anything. The trick is obviously get yourself some universal bicycle brake cable that's long enough. The cable you take off, save all the ends of it. When you're cutting cables, make sure you wear your protective wear. Grinder works much better than diagonal cutters. As a matter of fact, I don't recommend diagonal cutters. They make a mess out of the whole situation. Should you cut a piece of cable off, right, make sure you cut it clean. Once you cut it, grind the end so it's nice and flat, and then if you run a drill bit into it gently with your fingers, you can clean up the end of it so that it doesn't give you an area to catch, right? You cut your length and all that. Once again, you just make a little ball out of bell wire. Make sure you use flux. I used lead tin solder for this. Why? I don't know. I think it works a little better for this type of application, and I promise I'm going to keep my mouth off the end of it so I don't have to worry about getting lead poisoning. So we're all good. Alright, next time you see this thing, hopefully we fire it up and take it out for a ride. Thanks for watching and commenting and subscribing. Make sure you get out and enjoy your day, and while you're out there, go fix your all-terrain vehicle. Bye now.